In the spirit of respect, authenticity, and reconciliation, the town of Slave Lake honors and acknowledges that we are situated on the traditional lands of Sauridge First Nation within Treaty 8 territory, home to Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit peoples who have occupied these lands since time immemorial.
I'll make a motion to
Councillor
adopt the.
Malala.
Oh, sorry. I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Any further discussion? Call to question those in favor, and that is carried. Councillor Ferguson.
Just in regards to the minutes for September 19th, 2023, it has me listed as present, and I was in fact absent for that meeting, so.
Councillor Adams.
Motion to accept the minutes as amended.
Motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Call to question those in favor. And that is carried. Okay, on to our public hearing for bylaw 19/2023. So I declare the public hearing open and I state that the hearing is held pursuant to sections 230, 606, and 692 of the Municipal Government Act 2000 as amended. The purpose of bylaw 19/2023 is to amend sections 3, 88.3, and 110.3 of the land use bylaw 22-207 by adding definitions for shelter permanent, shelter temporary, and removing the existing definition for shelter. The bylaw also adds shelter temporary as a use to the industrial district and removes shelter as a use from the industrial district and the C2 secondary commercial district. Further, bylaw 19/2023 amends the land use district map of the land use bylaw by bylaw 22/2007 by redistricting as follows. Lot 12, block 1, plan 2120278 from B1 Business Industrial District and I Industrial District to CDC Council Direct Control District. Part of lot 4, block 3, plan 9123753 from Industrial District to Council Direct Control District. Lots 7 and 8, block 8, plan 1915 HW from C1 Downtown Commercial Mixed Use District to CDC Council Direct Control District. Part of lot 1, plan 9923252 from Industrial District to CDC Council Direct Control District. The notice of the hearing was given in writing to the applicant, the assessed landowner or landowners and adjoining landowners, and the planning and development officer. The notice of the hearing was advertised on the town's website from September 13th, 2023 to October 3rd, 2023. Presentations are to be brief and to the point, and the order for hearing presentations will be the planning and development officer, those in favor of the bylaw, those opposed to the bylaw, and any person deemed to be affected who wishes to be heard. When you do come to the mic, if you're going to speak, all persons giving presentations are to state their name and address. Take it away, Larry.
Your worship and members of council. So the purpose of this report is for council to hold the required public hearing and consider second and third reading for bylaw 19/2023. Administration is bringing forward this bylaw in an effort to streamline the development approval process for developments that can't be effectively accommodated under any other land use district because of unique land use characteristics, necessity for innovative ideas or unusual site constraints. The MPC reviewed this application at its meeting last night, and they are indicated that they support bylaw 19/2023. The bylaw was also advertised on social media sites and referral letters were sent out. To date, we haven't received any comments with respect to bylaw number 19/2023. So I just want to provide a brief explanation of each section of the amending bylaw. So section 1 and the amending bylaw is attached page 12 of the agenda. Section 1 removes existing definition for shelter. Section 2 adds new definitions for shelter permanent and shelter temporary. Shelter permanent, means a development providing emergency overnight accommodation. That may include a kitchen and dining facility, showers and bathrooms, relaxation areas, and laundry facilities, and may also include daytime drop-in services, and therefore may operate 24 hours per day. Accommodation and offices for resident staff may be incorporated as an accessory use. A permanent shelter may only be approved in the council direct control district. Shelter temporary means a development providing emergency overnight accommodation that may include a kitchen and dining facilities, showers and bathrooms, relaxation areas, and laundry facilities, and may also include daytime drop-in services and therefore may operate 24 hours per day. Offices only for resident staff may incorporated as an accessory use. Temporary shelter may only operate for a period of 6 consecutive months. Once the approval expires, this use must cease for a period of 6 consecutive months before temporary shelter may be applied for again on the same site. You will note that shelter permanent also allows daytime drop-in services, which means they may operate 24 hours per day. They also offer the ability to provide accommodation and offices for resident staff. Further, shelters permanent will only be considered for sites that are zone CDC Council Direct Control District. Temporary shelters offer the same services as shelter permanent, with the exception of accommodation for residents for staff, and they may be approved for a period of 6 consecutive months only. And again, the use must cease for a period of 6 consecutive months. Section 3 of the amending bylaw removes shelter as a use from the C2 secondary commercial district and the I institutional district. Section 4 adds shelter temporary as a discretionary use to the institutional district. You will note that shelter permanent is not listed as a use in the CDC Council Direct Control District. This is because the CDC does not contain a list of permitted or discretionary uses. Section 5 of the amending bylaw contains all of the redistricting elements as it amends the land use district map of the land use bylaw. Schedule A of the amending bylaw provides the map references in addition to location maps which have been provided and attached to this report. I won't go through those because they were already read or indicated. So there's a couple of options. Council could approve bylaw 19/2023 the way it is. Council could defeat the bylaw on second reading, or council could amend the bylaw, and depending on the extent of the amendments, a second public hearing may be required. And that's all I have other than questions, if there are any.
I'll open the floor to council for questions.
This is public hearing.
Okay.
Thank you, Laurie. As I see none, I will call any of those in favor of the bylaw that wish to speak. Any of those in favor of the bylaws that wish to speak? As I see none, I will see any of those opposed to the bylaw that wish to speak. Can come forward. Please remember to state your name and address. And reminder that presentations are to be brief and to the point.
Pardon?
Presentations are to be brief and to the point.
Oh, not gonna be a PowerPoint. John Lund, 212 Second Ave Northeast.
Thank you.
I live directly behind and beside lot 7-8. It must be October because we're talking shelters again. I am opposed to rezoning this to CDC. I believe it's got a good use the way it is. And I don't know where this came from. Why is all this happening?
I'd be happy to speak to that.
Yeah, who asked for the rezoning of that particular building?
So what we're actually looking for is we're looking for, obviously, there's 4 properties that have been identified as potentially moving to CDC, depending on the results of this bylaw. When we're looking at the location of a permanent homeless shelter, which would be not for this upcoming season, but for seasons following that, we need to consider all locations available in town. Rezoning as such would allow proper consultation to occur between all neighborhoods, business owners, residents, any of those deemed to be affected. So that would be occurring this January. I don't want to give a specific date because that's to be seen, but we are going to be looking at proper consultation with.
If you pass it.
If it passes,
reading,
yes,
right?
if this passes, and that's what I had stated before, if the bylaw passes.
Mhm.
Any of these sites would be considered regarding the location of a permanent shelter.
So all this rezoning for CDC is based around just the shelter?
At the time, yes.
So the council wants total control of that? They don't want to bring it to the public?
So when we're looking at this being, well, and this is what we're discussing right now. Pardon? But they can ask questions, but as well, you can questions are allowed back and forth.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, that's, I'm just clarifying that
Yeah.
there's allowed rebuttal from council and from the presentations. When we're looking at it, and that's what the discussion here tonight is, if this is appropriate to zone to CDC. So when we look at our reports and new business, that's the discussion that's going to occur amongst council.
But why CDC?
As far as zoning,
As
because that,
far as zoning,
when we're looking at where a homeless shelter can be placed,
right?
the most appropriate location, in my belief, but again, it's up for discussion regarding this bylaw, would be CDC, because it is for items that are hard to place and that do experience situations such as NIMBYism, which occurs quite frequently in placing a shelter.
Yeah, well, that's a euphemism that I don't partake in, but because it's in my community, but. Where did it come from? Where did the discussion of like? Council can say it's a shelter regardless of what public opinion is. Is this correct?
Council
When it's
can
under
decide.
CDC?
Council would have the discussion as to where to locate this. Yes, that would be council. That is the
And the
decision.
full say of no, regardless of what public opinion is.
Yes.
But I don't think that's fair. I think you're hiding it from the public that way. I think the public needs to vote on something like that. So,
No, I appreciate that. And I'll speak for myself on this. I think it's important that council actually does make these types of decisions, that it is in the responsibility of elected officials to engage the entire community as to how much they would like to participate. So obviously you coming tonight indicates that you want to be part of these discussions.
for
And
sure.
I think that's very important, that we engage the entire community in looking at these locations. I do believe it is an elected official decision, and I do believe that that decision shouldn't necessarily be forced on volunteer groups such as MPC and SDAB, who a lot of the members aren't even from our region. I would like to think as elected officials and representatives that were elected by the community, that with the proper consultation, we would be able to determine where the best location is, considering all locations at once. When we're looking at that, we would be doing what I think has failed in the past, is that we've looked at each shelter location in a silo. So you're only consulting the residents, the businesses, the affected individuals in each separate location,
Mhm.
and not looking at all locations as a whole to decide what is best for the community, for something that truthfully has been very hard to place over the past however many years it's operated. As you so mentioned, when you came to sit down, it must be October because a shelter is coming.
Every October.
And this is what we are trying to avoid.
Mhm.
So that
In
would be,
October. But the way that you're trying to avoid it is that you're, how I see it, this is how I see it. So we're changing definitions of shelter. And you're blanketing CDC for all the proposed in certain groups of where shelters could possibly land. So it kind of takes the public away.
Councillor
So
Gramlich?
this isn't for this winter, right? Like it's October and
Okay.
time of year, but this isn't for a shelter this winter. So we've identified 5 possible spots. So come January, I'll speak for myself. You have a whole community buy-in. Here's 5 spots. Let's knock them off the list and find the best one, rather than let's try this one. That didn't work, because the answer is going to be none of them work. But now we have 5. So now we're going to narrow it down to one spot with what we hope would be a community buy-in. What we hope is all of you show up and say, well, I don't think this works because of X, Y, and Z. Okay, let's look at the next scenario. So this is for next October, but we're doing it now instead of for next month.
And I'll touch on the shelter definitions. I think Councillor Gramlich did quite a good job of explaining the consultation process and why we're looking at multiple areas. When we're looking at amending the shelter definitions, is that previously under our land use bylaw, which is arguably the sections from the 90s, there's nothing that accommodates a 24/7 shelter, which is what the funding that we have received is to facilitate. So that is where the adjustment is coming in, so that there is a definition for a temporary shelter and a permanent shelter, so that we are compliant.
Okay. So why don't you narrow down the locations and then change your zoning? Why do you need to change zoning on 5 properties?
So, because let's pretend, let's say your zone is the best one, or that's what we identify it as. Well, now we go through all this, we did all this consultation, and then we don't vote it through, like maybe, you know what I mean? So now we have 5 that they're it's a blanket, yes, but now we could identify to one. I guess we're doing it backwards, but I think it's more forward thinking that we're going to eliminate them all and not have to do this argument next October and delay it. And now it's November and now we're scrambling for another spot like's happened the last 10 or 15 years. We're going to do that now leading up to it. So I'd hope we have this done by spring and then we know where it's going. That's my hope.
Yeah, but did you just not say that you were gonna get the public involved when you do come up with the possible locations?
These are
You narrowed it
these are
down.
the 5 possible locations. Let's let the public, along with council and any other stakeholders, narrow it down to one.
Now,
Rather if we start with yours tonight, now we get to come here about how bad it is in your area. And then next Tuesday, it's another area, right? So let's just do it all at once and as a community, find the best spot.
I don't think the people in town knew this was about shelters.
Well, it has.
This was about council control over zoning for
But that will
shelters
come out
in
in
their
January.
areas.
We're like, hey, everybody, we'd love for your input and there's going to be tons of consultation. In that, like, I think you're going to be happy with what's coming.
But then it would be but then there's no control from public opinion.
Well, there is, because you get to say, hey, I'm never voting for you again. Hey, X, Y, Z.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
For sure,
Like,
you can do that.
Everyone's involved.
Yeah, but that's not where we want to be.
Well, that's.
We want our councilmen, people to do to do the elected job.
this is arguably what we're doing is the elected job. This season's shelter, as it comes forth in the coming weeks, that location will be temporary. We're not choosing a permanent shelter location before the November 1st start date. The permanent shelter location will be done after community consultation. And I'll speak for myself, and I do think I can speak for everyone at this table, saying that community consultation is one of the most important pieces of this, because we want to see this done right. And because we are immensely frustrated by year after year, having these same discussions, having these same approvals where we're looking at each one individually. It is equally as frustrating as us as representatives of the community. We want there to be a consistent permanent location so that we don't have to do this, because I understand this isn't fun for you. This isn't fun for us as well. This is not something that we enjoy having to rehash every fall. So our long-term goal, if what we're looking at that is we're looking at a permanent location. What we need to do to get that is we need community engagement, and we need the community to engage back with us. You're doing the right thing by being here and doing that. And when we do that in the new year, that's what I expect our community to engage so that we can make a decision together. You indicated everybody voting on something like this. Well, our voter turnout generally represents less than 15% of the population. In the by-election, it was arguably less than that. So what I'm hoping for is a more significant engagement on that. If the community truthfully cares where this is going, then we all need to come together and make that. And that's what this is allowing us to do.
For sure, but but you're taking the public's opinion, like the power of it, to say that that's in your community and they don't want it. You're taking that away. If you go CDC.
Councillor Adams.
You made a couple comments there about how it's kind of going around public opinion. It's coming around everything. It's already moved through. It's gone through MPC, which is the same process anything is. If we were truly trying to go around the public, we would have done a land use bylaw change that would allow a permanent use of shelters inside of a C2 district or institutional district. The turnout on that from the public would have been nothing, would have gone through, and then it would just all be done and there'd be no say. That
That's
is
why we
not
have
what
the
we're doing.
MPC.
What's that?
That's why we have the MPC.
And that wouldn't happen on a, yeah, so anyway. That's right. This process we're trying to do here is one, to lay the groundwork for what we know is a very difficult and controversial decision throughout our community, and to get this all on the table at the same time. Now, whether or not we do the CDC now, or if we decided to do the CDC later, I get your argument with that. But the long and short of it is, it needs to be a CDC piece. This is a very controversial thing. I wouldn't want it in my backyard, just like everyone in town who argues it doesn't want it in their backyard. It has to go somewhere. So this, I feel, is the best mechanism for us to move forward. and try and get this, especially trying to get that public opinion on multiple sites.
And elected officials to take responsibility for the job that we're elected to do, and that is to consider public opinion
Absolutely,
and make the decision.
absolutely. If you disrupt the neighborhood, right, where people live,
Absolutely.
I think you're putting the cart before the horse with the CDC right now. If you're gonna throw everything on the table, throw it on the table. Are these proposed shelters? Or are these just just zoning changes? Because all the literature that I got, it's just a zoning change. And then there's some stuff talking about shelters.
And there,
It's not putting everything on the table. It's not being forthcoming. That, in my opinion.
I appreciate your perspective. And I think what we will see is the forthcoming part is when we're looking at the zoning decision and discussing as a council is that consultation piece. And because we don't want to rush that consultation now is why there appears to be a lag. Because there is no, I think we would be doing a disservice to all the residents to say, okay, we went out to 10 houses, 10 business owners in each area and we consulted them and we're done. What we need is an actual proper community consultation, probably which our town really hasn't seen the likes of recently. And that's what I firmly believe we need that. I understand and I respect your opinion regarding the cart before horse. I'll use your analogy because that's the words that are coming out right now. I appreciate your opinion regarding that. But I believe that the end result will be very similar and that we're doing this so that we can look at all those locations at once. So that would be my opinion coming from there.
And I just want to note it that this is shelter talk today. This is, all the zoning is about shelters.
Appreciate that. And we look forward to consult in the new year.
Well, I hope
if
so.
this passes.
I said the last thing last time. There needs to be some canvassing from the counselors in the area to go door to door and say, hey, where's the best place? Out of these 5 places, where's the best place?
100% agree.
Instead of being here today and doing a zoning change. That's all I had to say.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else opposed to the bylaw that would wishes to speak? Either of you can come forward. Please state your name and address to the mic, please, once you sit down. And a reminder that presentations are to be brief and to the point.
Brenna Ames, I'm a small business owner and member of the Chamber of Commerce, or on the board of the Chamber of Commerce. So I'm not totally understanding of all, but this is just about the CDC part for 4 properties. How many other CDC properties are there around in our community that have already been passed and labeled as, am I asking a right question?
You're asking how many other properties are zoned CDC? I would have to default to Lori.
I would guess, I mean, without having, I'm thinking we have probably about 6. Some, the ones that jump out to my mind are the large sections of land in the outskirts, in the south area structure plan area. They were rezoned to CDC probably about 15 years ago before pre-fire to prevent logging. If that was the intent of the zoning way back then. And then there's the old Yamaha shop that still sits with the CDC zoning.
Does,
That's
yes.
played about 4 or 5 years ago. 4 years ago, yeah. And I think that's roughly. So if I were to guess about 6, 7 properties in total.
So for that particular,
8, okay, not a lot. Yeah.
so typically CDCs are placed, or however you word it, for emergencies or logging to prevent that kind of thing,
Unique uses.
unique uses. So then these 4 properties are because of a controversial something coming up. So I guess I'm concerned about those particular 4 properties. I know that it's controversial. I know you guys are going to have a tough decision, but as a business owner and member of chamber, when you build things, those will come. So let's say the medical clinic, I know that there's been people interested in having a play school there. You build, people will come. You build businesses, people will come. So because it affects our neighborhood, I just am concerned about the particular pieces, and so I'm then opposed to some of those being in our downtown core. So I am concerned about why those particular four, when historically like, I'm not sure why the old Honda or the old Yamaha, why was that one put into?
That was put in because the recreation. Goes only in the C2, not in the downtown core. And so the council made that decision so that they can control the development a little bit more.
So yeah, I'm not sure, but I think that the four that you guys have, or at least two of the four that you guys have chosen, I don't think should be part of this equation, and I don't like that council would be taking charge of those when they affect our downtown so greatly. And we are constantly trying to get downtown businesses and let's revamp the downtown, but why, I would hope that there's more thought put towards a couple of those. Does that make sense?
Nope, I 100% hear your concerns, and obviously I sound like a bit of a broken wheel with regards to the community discussion. Consultation. Everyone here at this table wants what's best for our town. We
Mhm.
want what's best for our businesses. We want what's best for our residents. When we're looking at 4 areas, we need to look at them in conjunction with the other. Maybe 1 or 2 will stand out with regards to the residents as being a better location than the others. And that's the discussion that we need to have. And we will be looking at implications regarding businesses, proximity to schools, proximity to residents. There's a variety of factors that are going to occur in this consultation.
I still don't like, so if public opinion goes in and something controversial like the homeless shelter comes up and you guys can't decide, am I correct in understanding that it goes outside of our community and there's like people in place that would make these decisions for us?
Not in this process.
Not in this process, but in NPC and then an applicant or.
Like in the like for something applying to be on that. So then I understand why we wouldn't want other people making those decisions, but then let's take the best ones, like ones that shouldn't be in there at all, out of the
And so
equation.
why all 4, well, I'll step in before I get to you, Councillor Moellem, why all 4 properties were identified is that they are government owned in one way or another. So these 4 properties aren't currently available for outside businesses for use. That's what they're not for. Their government owned properties in some form of the other. And so they're either town owned or provincially owned. So when we're looking at that CDC, so you'd mentioned the clinic building,
Mhm.
zoning this to CDC in future doesn't prevent it from becoming a play school or a daycare or something else there, if it wasn't the area that is selected for the shelter. So you're asking why these 4 properties were identified? It was identified because we're not rezoning a private person's property, like a private business owner's or an individual's property, to CDC.
So there's not like another process that would go through the normal process to say, take the medical building and we want to play school or whatever it may be and go through a normal process to get it to that? Is that
Not when it's on
complicated?
CDC, then it would be council's decision at that point in time, unless it was rezoned at a later date back to its previous use.
Sorry, explain that again.
So we're zoning right now to CDC.
Mhm.
And let's say that the homeless shelter does not end up in the location of that building. And a person would like to come forth and put a play school and are able to acquire that building, it would come through the CDC process. Unless at some point in the future, council, if this bylaw passes, if council rezoned that to its previous use, then it would pass through MPC and SDIB.
So is this bylaw specifically, and I'm sorry for not knowing, it's specific for these 4 pieces, or it's just a bylaw that,
So the
allows
bylaw
it.
has 2 pieces. One
Okay.
is the shelter definitions, the permanent and the temporary.
okay,
And then the other piece is the rezoning of those 4 properties to CDC.
So-
Councillor Moellem?
So basically what we've done is what we've done is we're putting out options out there. And all these options are kind of either town owned or government owned. So by doing that, I think it kind of makes it a little bit easier where we're not saying we're putting this in, on, people have said it's on Brenna's land or on this person's land. So these are, either our own properties or government properties that we kind of put out there. Those are kind of ones that we might have a little bit of say in, so.
Okay, I'm sure we could go back and forth forever. I think that and maybe, so if this was CDC was not this was not passed, if I wanted to open a play school in that, so then a whole rezoning process would have to happen. And it could happen
If this bylaw passes.
if it did not pass.
If this
Like,
bylaw did
the-
not pass,
yeah.
then absolutely you would go, you wouldn't
Okay.
have to do rezoning. It would stay at its existing zone. Institutional.
Oh, okay, so if I wanted to open a business there, say,
It would have to fit within the institutional definition. If you wanted to open, sorry, is it C1? It's commercial. So it would have to fit within the C1. Lori's like, oh God, that's the wrong zone. It would have to fit. Yeah, it would have to fit within the C1 usage, which is downtown commercial mixed use. So that would be able to open in that building
okay.
if it passed through.
So then that being said, I am super disappointed that council has chosen those two properties near our downtown area to be part of the CDC when it still could be functional and contributing factor to our downtown or our core, that you guys are including this in that.
It can under the CDC as well. It doesn't exempt.
Yes,
that.
I understand that, but it doesn't go through the normal process. It's giving you guys the power, and I don't agree with that.
Councillor Adams.
Under the current zoning of C1, a discretionary use is allowed for a drop-in shelter already.
Mm,
So,
because of why?
because
For
it's
a
in the
temporary?
bylaw already.
For temporary?
No, that's the changes we're making for a drop-in shelter. It could be used for that already during the day. So,
During the day.
so there's things in the bylaw currently that you'd be surprised what you can or cannot have in a C1. It's all in the land use bylaw. That's the point of having discretionary use and permanent use. The description's in there. I know the challenge with finding this is very difficult. It's much like I said to John, I feel when it's this controversial, we need the public engagement and we need to have control as council to be able to put it where it needs to go.
Mhm.
But it does, as much as both of you, and I mean, sure, everybody in town is concerned, that public consultation piece is a must, a very big must.
Okay,
Thank you, Brenna.
yeah, thanks.
You can state your name and address for the mic. And a reminder that presentations are to be brief and to the point.
Okay, I'm Edie Clausen. I'm representing Big Fish Bay and 1000 Caribou Trail Northwest. I just want to say we're extremely disappointed. And we definitely feel you guys are putting the cart before the horse. You know, if you want a public consultation, these locations should have been presented. Public consultation should have happened first, and then the step should be taken. The very people that voted and put you into this place, you are closing off their voices. You're taking their right away to vote on this. We no longer are able to vote on this or appeal it in any way by going this route. And as for our location, we're our own little town over there. We contribute a lot to the community. Our customers are visiting each and every one of your businesses. And I know you guys feel it when we are busy, you guys are busy. With having had the temporary shelter close to us, it's been very harming. And we just want it noted that we strongly object to this.
Councillor Gramlich.
What part are you objecting to?
The public should be able to vote. It
Well,
shouldn't be
it'll
up
never
to
be a
council.
public vote. but
Pardon me?
It will never be a vote, but we're not gonna have a referendum on where it should go, but you could talk to us and use your voice, but I'm gonna play a hypothetical with you. So you don't want this next to the campsite, obviously, right? For obvious
right.
reasons.
Absolutely.
So under this scenario, there's a 1 in 5 chance it goes there. If you don't want us to do this, there's a 100% chance it goes there because that spot's zoned for it right now.
But why why couldn't these conversations take place? Why couldn't there have been already for the last year? The communications going with everybody in the community, showing them how each location could present itself.
Well, and two, Jeff, give me the date, but until 2 weeks ago, we didn't have funding for this.
Yeah, that's correct.
So the town didn't have funding for this until 2 weeks ago, right? So we're already 1 year ahead of any other group that's ever done it. We're starting this process now. So for the long-term viability of a homeless shelter, the talks are beginning right now tonight. And then with these 5 spots, I hope you all come back, and I don't know what Jeff has in store, but maybe it's a big gymnasium and all these different ideas, and everyone could talk then. If we don't do this, like I said, there's a 100% chance it's getting built at the fire hall from now to the end of time.
Well, we definitely want the opportunity to appeal these decisions. And as taxpayers, I believe we should have that right to anybody in any section of town should have the right to appeal these decisions and be heard.
Fair. You will be heard, because I assume you will come to all the
Absolutely,
consultation.
We will. We will. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else opposed to the bylaw that wishes to come forward? As I see none, any person deemed to be affected by the bylaw who wishes to be heard? One more time, anyone? Pardon? Oh, oh,
Can I speak again on it?
I'm not sure on the procedure.
No. If you're speaking as opposed, then you can't speak in as affected. But you can ask him to come up and allow him to speak as opposed again, if you so choose as the chair.
So cheers.
It's on, either opposed or in favor of. She'll decide whether she's on.
You said.
I said, we already did in favor, oppose, and now we're on deemed to be affected. If you would like to speak again, you'd be willing to.
Actually, I got one question. That came to light. I didn't know about this money. So you just got this money approved 2 weeks ago?
Yes,
So the process is rocketed to this point?
yes.
And how many meetings have you had since you were approved the meeting or the money?
So the funding has been provided in an unprecedented grant by the provincial government.
Yeah.
So as you know, our council's been advocating for the last
6+ years.
6+ years, I would say, regarding asking the province for a path forward to addressing homelessness in our community. We respect our taxpayers and can identify that a massive tax increase to cover this is likely not viable. So that is where the advocacy has been directed through the previous mayor and myself and our councils. We had received word from a few weeks ago that thanks to the efforts of advocacy and our MLA Scott Sinclair, that our town is receiving funding regarding a permanent homeless shelter. So
That's great news.
Yes, and there is capital and operating funding that is provincially funded for a provincially funded municipally run shelter. I would just like to point out that the only other community to receive such funding is Lethbridge. So we are the smallest community to receive by a long shot. Previously, Lethbridge was their rural model. And now we are being given that opportunity for our region here with the ultimate goal of the province's larger plan regarding detox and treatment, because they are building 11 detox and treatment centers over the next 4 years. So the goal to address public safety in our community and the goal to address crime begins with a multi-step process. Part of that is protecting our unhoused population and then looking at appropriate connections to detox and treatment facilities moving forward. So yes, this has all moved incredibly quickly. The amount, the commitment, the financial commitment and the timeline has been unprecedented. I've never seen the government move this quickly, but both Minister Nixon and Minister Williams are very motivated to look at what they can do for rural communities.
Is there a caveat to like, you have to have a plan in place or you lose the money?
I don't believe there's any specifics, but there is specifics with regards to how the funding is used. Obviously, the funds can only be used towards the operation of the homeless shelter. And so it is for the 24/7 operation through both. So previously, we just had the winter mat program that was generously operated by the Homeless Coalition, and then before that, the Friendship Center. So now we would be looking into a 24/7 shelter in both, obviously, all year round. So, and it is a fixed facility, so be looking at the trailer model. And that's kind of where we're moving forward with that.
Okay, just to be noted that I'm affected because the medical clinic is my close proximity, it's my backyard.
I appreciate
It's across the alley.
Yeah.
So,
No, I
okay,
appreciate that.
thanks for listening.
Thank you. Any other person deemed to be affected who wishes to be heard? Oh, we got. Go ahead, no.
Good evening, Mayor Ward. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. This is Isaac Twin, technically not a resident here, but just confirming that you have received the letter I sent earlier.
Yes, we've
Have been
received
shared?
the letter.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. And so we will be able to meet at some point then, I assume.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no, we were in talks with MLA Sinclair, and so we're going to be looking with his schedule. He would like to meet so that the GOA perspective from the grant is able to be communicated. And I believe he's making connections with the Lethbridge Blood Tribe organization so that we're able to get some of their representatives as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joy McGregor, 816 9th Street Southeast, Slave Lake, Alberta, deemed affected. My worry is I am in charge of 1,300 plus students and staff in this community. I take that very seriously. And when people that are deemed to be unhoused and decide that they no longer want to follow rules, which we know that in any good given day, none of us follow rules and decide to break rules. What is going to happen with these 1,300 students that occupy this and staff? Because it's wonderful that we're getting a shelter. It's wonderful that it's going to be run by the town. You guys will do an amazing job. You do an amazing job at running everything else that is for the town. What is going to happen and what is going to be the responsibility to come back on the town when something happens to a child or a staff member that I am in charge of? That's my effect that it's going to happen. It happens on a daily basis right now where we have people breaking into things, riding bikes, stealing bikes from Roland Michener. We had a huge problem of that last year. Does not mean that all these people are unhoused that are stealing bikes. It means that there is an addiction problem, which we are going to address with building something else. But my worry is for the students in this community when we already are facing a huge problem with break-ins and crimes and drugs. What is the town, because it's government funded and municipally ran, what are you guys, because it is your elected official job and you just finished telling me that and I appreciate that. What are you going to do? Because I'm going to be looking for somebody's head on a chopping block if something happens to students in this community because elected officials have done their job, but not finished and completed and wrapped around their job. So what will happen to those students, but basically what is going to happen to some of those people when something happens to students? Anybody, I'll take it.
Counselor Adams.
I'm just trying to follow what you're asking. Are you speaking as Joy, the
I'm
individual, or
affected.
trustee?
I'm affected because I am in charge of 1,300 students as a chair of the school board.
So you're
What
talking as a
will
school board?
happen when that happens? What is going to happen? What am I going to tell my parents?
Okay, so you're speaking to the
Yes.
school board. right
What
now.
am I going to tell those parents? Because I don't know what to tell them.
And when you say something happens, what do you mean by that?
Well, when they break rules, so then bikes get stolen, people are wandering around, people are not of their same mind because they have broken the rules and decided that they will continue with addictions, those kind of things. What will happen? What will happen if they're on the playground?
What do you do now?
We don't have that kind of an issue right now because we don't have a huge population, because we don't house a huge population in this community right now, but we will when we build a 24-hour shelter. That's what we're expected. We're expected to grow our population, because if we are going to build a shelter, I would hope that we would be willing to take anyone and everyone that is unhoused in our region to our shelter, because we're not going to turn them away. And we are going to be one of the biggest shelters. You just said the other one is in Lethbridge to get this kind of funding. So we're going to be a huge shelter in this region. We're not turning anyone away. Everyone will be able to go there. And then what happens, because we're going to grow that population of unhoused to give them temporary housing in a homeless shelter?
It wouldn't be temporary housing. I don't.
Well, is it a temporary, or so they, okay, we're going to let them live there. So this will be their house?
So it'd be like a, I think, MAP program, but with day planning. So you have to, and I'm not administering this, right? This is like government of Alberta stuff with a plan. But so you have to clean up your mat and or cot, move it to the side, and then the tables and chairs come out, right? And then the talking starts, elders come in, some sort of healing thing. Again, I'm not administering it. I'm taking words from the government and
Don't
plans
take
and so
words
forth.
from other
Okay.
people and say,
I'm just saying, it's like a MAP program with daytime programming. And then long-term, short-term, the plan would be to get them to detox and treatment, right? Not, I don't think you're setting up shop there for 6 months at a time. That's not what this is.
So the goal is temporary shelter to protect life and limb. So we're obviously, and you're alluding to it in your speech, we need to balance compassion and public safety. And when we were speaking with the ministers last week, that is their goal, both the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions and the Minister of Indigenous Relations. They said we need to balance compassion and public safety. So when we're speaking of this huge homeless shelter, I'm speaking that it's huge for our community. When we're looking at the actual capacity of the homeless shelter, generally it's limited to the structure that's in place, which is 20 to 25. And obviously all individuals that are able up to capacity to be accepted will. But there is capacity that we do have to meet with regards to fire code. So as Councillor Gramlich was speaking here, it's that the ultimate goal is, and that's also the goal of the province, is to with appropriate consultation and with appropriate treatment, try and get individuals to want to pursue detox and treatment, and then provide the means for them to seek that treatment at an appropriate place. There's a few shelters that have been, or a few detox and treatment centers that have been built, and there's 11 more coming. I think 2 are going to open right away, and then that's the long-term plan. So the long-term plan from the government, we are receiving the funding from, as you know, is not to just build shelter after shelter after shelter to temporarily protect life and limb, but it is to show true compassion and to work through programming to try and move individuals out of this crisis. The entire country is in this crisis. The entire province is in this crisis. And I think that we're fortunate that we're in the unique situation that we are actually one of the few to receive funding. It's been a struggle for the Homeless Coalition and the Native Friendship Center every year with regards to funding and with regards to resources. And there's been volunteers that have been put in tireless amounts of efforts to make those programs run. And now we're lucky enough to be able to have something that is going to be sustainable. And that's something that hopefully we can see individuals move out of and move into appropriate programs and then be reintegrated. It's a very long-term vision, and it's about a 15-step process, but I think taking one step forward is better than doing nothing. And I am also concerned for our resident safety. I have a child in the school system. We all have children, most of them in the school system still. I do believe that for public safety, the long-term vision of this from the province is going to be effective, but it is going to take a while to get there. And I don't think that doing nothing is a more effective solution than doing this.
yeah, but it's temporary. So you can only stay there for one night, or you can stay there for 6 months if you need to. Because if you're unhoused, and with the way that we have not a lot of housing here right now, how long are you going to be allowed to stay there?
Theoretically, yeah, okay, you could stay there forever. But ideally, the idea is instead of kicking people out in the morning and it's still -30 in the morning, and then you still go back to your peer groups and you still do bad things. And then you come there at night because it's cold because you don't want to sleep in the bush. Well, now, like I said, you bring out the tables and chairs and you talk and you have mental health supports and you have elders and you have all these wraparound services come to them and say, hey, like maybe you just need a ride home. Maybe you need to go to detox, right? There's all these different things that administratively you could do rather than kicking people back out in the street to be cold and get back to your peer groups. It's a very early step in their idea, but in my head, it works. And it's different than anything the other governments or other provincial governments have done. They're trying to change the way it's going. So we could start cleaning up the streets and getting people back to being healthy instead of, I won't use the minister's name, instead of doing the Vancouver model where we're just providing drugs and a free place to sleep.
Yeah, and I appreciate your wraparound services, but that's something we've been lobbying for 10 plus years. And to have wraparound services, we don't have enough services in Slave Lake right now. So where are all these wraparound services coming from? So my worry is we don't have enough services right now. In the last 3 weeks of being in meetings day and night in all different kinds of capacity, the biggest concern right now is housing and daycare. So where are these wraparound service people coming from? Because we don't have enough services in Slave Lake right now to deal with our population, our unhoused people that we already have in our community members that have either been unhoused for years. We've gone to school with them. We know them. They're part of our peer group. They're part of our group. But if we are going to be the homeless population, unhoused, temporary, non-temporary place to live, we are going to grow that population. So if we can't manage what we have now, how are we going to manage more?
I understand that sentiment and let's hope it doesn't grow massively. But
I want it to grow massively because if we want to make a real difference and we want to help unhoused people, people with childhood trauma, people that come from addictions, people that come from abuse, then we have to be willing to bring everyone and not say, you can't come, you can't come. We want them to come here. We want to welcome them, but we need to be able to take care of them.
well, we won't have the capacity to take care of everybody, but the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions will be here in the next couple weeks, 2-3 weeks. He's coming through and they're looking at transport ideas, right, for these treatment centers. So once you're there for 2 or 3 days and they figured out what they need, there's going to be 11 of these in Alberta where you can get them to detox treatment, next steps. And like I said, maybe some people just need a ride home. So instead of kicking them out, you talk to them and you find what's missing in their life and hopefully they bridge gaps. And it's not going to be perfect the first year. It's not going to be perfect the first 2 years, but it's a process that hopefully plays out better than the one that Alberta's been in for the past 6 years.
And realistically, we have this problem whether or not we have a shelter. And I would rather take a step forward with this. When we're looking at wraparound services, you're right. In the town of Slave Lake, we don't have a ton of wraparound services, but other
In the
communities.
province, we
In the
don't
province,
have
yes.
wraparound services.
When I was talking to the Minister of Indigenous Relations, they identified 4 or 5 organizations that are currently working in Northern Alberta that would be willing to take a look at our shelter and look at partnerships. So one of them is Poundmaker. There's a variety of them that do offer. Some offer detox and treatment models. Some are just regarding transitional housing. There's a whole bunch of different pieces: childhood trauma, mental health and addictions, counseling, the whole list. And these connections are being made because we are receiving this funding and because the province wants to see this succeed. Because I do believe that if this succeeds, that we will see funding for shelters arise in other smaller municipalities. You know as well as I do that rural is often ignored all the time.
All the time.
Rural is always ignored. The fact that a couple years ago, the ministers were saying that, the Lethbridge was the rural model for their homelessness with the Blood Tribe is.
They're not
everyone in-
rural.
Right. Everyone in Alberta, Northern Alberta went, no, that's not what reality is here. So this is an opportunity to try something different. And we are going to make those connections, and we've already started making those connections, but as you can appreciate, the timeline's been very short. So.
Yeah, I'm still very worried about growing population of unhoused people. when we are having a hard time growing a population of professional people because of our housing and daycare, but we are going to grow our unhoused population with not the services in this area or in this region. And there can only be so much windshield time of driving here from other places to help. And we don't have enough to help right now. And we're growing an unhoused population because, again, if we're building this shelter, we want people to come and use it. We want those people and everyone to be able to come here, but we don't have the capacity right now to handle what we have. How are we going to have that capacity? So you've said there's other places, there's other things in there. I am still very worried and very concerned about how much we go population and what about the students in our community and the staff and everyone else in our community. So when you have community consultation, let's hope that we have AHS, because I mean, they'll tell you they have all the people in place and can handle everything. They're lying through their teeth because they can't handle what we have now. We have mental health and addictions. We just got someone new. They can't keep up with what they're doing. We just heard that at a meeting last week.
Yeah, we met
So-
with Minister LaGrange actually this morning.
Yes.
And talked about, and that's the health minister, we met with her regarding our needs for our community. And we're lacking in a variety of areas. The size of the shelter that we're going to be operating this year is the size that it has been previously. It's to meet the existing needs of our communities, but what we're offering is it's basically a first step to provide stability. We need to provide stability in that. And hopefully, when we were speaking with individuals that have been affected by homelessness and mental health and addictions, the changes in shelter locations, the changes in it's not open in the summer, it's only open the winter, sometimes it's open days. All of that creates a pattern of instability. That instability also doesn't foster trust within the homeless population. And if we're looking at fostering trust within the homeless population and a respect for our facility and for the managers of the shelter, hopefully what that will do, and that's the idea behind it all, is encourage individuals to seek treatment so that it isn't a long-term residence for the vast majority of the people there, that it is a stopping point on the road forward.
But if it's not a stopping point, it still will, and you will be able to stay there all
Yes.
the time because it will be run 24/7, open 24/7. So if it is comfortable and you are fed and you are housed and you can do your laundry and you can live there, because there isn't places for single men, single women, single families that are affordable right now, because there's not places for professionals to move here right now that are affordable, then people will be able to stay there.
Yes, and it is not, when you're speaking towards the shelter, it is still the model of one open room with mats that need to be put down or cots that need to be put down and then take it away. So these aren't pods. This isn't a.
Well, there must be men and women's side.
There is a.
I would hope
divide.
so.
Yes, obviously there is a divider that's per AHS regulations regarding that, but there isn't separate rooms for each individual. You aren't setting up shop there. It is still a relatively uncomfortable situation with regards to long-term housing. So you've been talking about long-term housing repeatedly there, and I get that. No, the doors aren't going to be closed to someone who needs to stay there for 6 months. However, the intention behind it, and intentions are intentions, but that's. I respect
There's
that.
always intentions.
There's always intentions.
But what happens, intentions and what really happens in the real world are usually very different. We all have great intentions, but in the end, what could happen could not be great.
And
Could
I'm
not be
hoping
great
with
for
the-
unhoused people.
I'm hoping with the support of the province, because they are wanting to see the success of this model. With the support of the province and the organizations that will be contributing to it, that when problems do arise, because problems will always arise. None of us are thinking this is going to be 100% perfect right out the gate, that we will be able to address those as they come up, and that we will work towards correcting the issues and identifying the problems and moving through them.
Well, I look forward to the community consultation. I hope it is more than one at a different times of days, of weeks, of all of that kind of stuff, because you will hear a lot more that probably won't be as positive. I've sat in your chair for a number of years and heard things that were not as positive. And it's going to take a lot of work to even get the buy-in and the trust from our community that this is something that is good for our community. Having a 24-hour shelter will take a lot of trust for our community to even believe that this is the right direction that we're going in. So
I
that's
appreciate
my
your comments.
effectiveness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else deemed to be affected that wishes to speak?
Hi, Nika Kutre. I live at 128 6th Ave Northwest. I'm just making a statement. I don't like that you guys put the Homeless Coalition and the Slave Lake Native Friendship Center in the same hoop. They're completely different. My grandma's done so much good work with the homeless, completely different from the Homeless Coalition. She ran it for 10 years. She did an amazing job doing that. There was less crime and everything that I've seen in the past 2 to 3 years of her not running it. I think that you guys should look back to the consultations you had last year with Tyler Warman and some of the statements that were made, because my grandma did make a couple of statements that would benefit you guys. I heard Sean say a lot of things that were in relation to the MAP program. My grandma started the MAP program. You guys should consult the Slave Lake Native Friendship Center for ideas and solutions, because you guys don't consult them. And they are the ones who are laying out practically the formation that you are using for the temporary and probably the permanent homeless shelter you guys are creating. So if I were you, I'd reach out to the people who have knowledge on it in the community. Thank you.
No, and I appreciate that, and I will just address that. The reason that the Friendship Center and the Homeless Coalition were addressed in my comments is to respect that the work that both organizations have done over the years. There is going to be an advisory council regarding the homeless shelter that will be developed, and stakeholders that are interested in doing that will be able to participate in that. And that's we'll be moving from there. So again, there's going to be significant community consultation moving forward. Thank you. Anyone else deemed to be affected who wishes to be heard? Okay. It's up to my discretion on that. Give you a brief period of time.
Okay, I just want to say thank you guys for all the hard work that you are putting into this. I know it is not an easy task and you will not please everyone, but I want to say the summer, we had a decent summer. The homeless had moved up, you guys know where, by the dirt bike track and stuff. They weren't close to us. We had a lot less crime. We had a lot less theft. We did have everything on lockdown, everything coded for our customers, which is really unfair. Now, during the winter, we found drugs in our bathrooms. We found needles. We found needles down our walking trails. By having them in the center of town, it doesn't just affect Big Fish Bay. It does affect the residents, the kids from school, the stuff that our customers were threatened using the walkway. But having them, I just want to make this point, having them a bit further away from residents and from the businesses definitely made a difference for us. And I just want that to be noted. And thank you again, you guys. I know this is not easy. You're going to see lots of objection. We're all going to have to really just open our minds and work together to make this a success. And let's remember, I think Big Fish Bay is a prime example of you build it and they will come. And I believe the same thing will happen with what's going on here. Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else deemed to be affected who wishes to be heard? Okay, I will now. Pardon? I did in favor, I did opposed, I did deemed to be affected. And okay, where are we at? That is all the presentations, and I will now declare this public hearing closed. I'm also going to request from administration a 5-minute break before we move into our reports. No. All right, we are on to reports and new business. Lori?
All right, your worship and members of council, just wanted to provide some additional information on the CDC zoning. And please ask questions if something isn't clear. So the general purpose of the CDC Council Direct Control District is to provide for developments that could not be effectively accommodated under any other land use district because of unique land characteristics, necessity for innovative ideas, or unusual site constraints as determined by council. In addition, there are general rules within the CDC district, and they are all developments must comply with provisions of any statutory plan affecting the land use proposed to be developed. And all land use applications shall be regulated by appropriate development standards as deemed necessary by council. So that first one, all developments must comply with the provisions of statutory plan, is sort of the check and balance for the CDC district. It also, what it means is that council should not be utilizing CDC zoning to control developments that are not addressed in a statutory plan. Or in other words, willy-nilly applications of CDC zoning. Further, it's the responsibility of the planning department to advise council when their use of the CDC zone falls outside of the intended purpose of the legislation and the municipal long-range plans. So it becomes, when it becomes an abuse of that authority. The municipal development plan is one of our statutory plans that has several policy and objective statements that make it clear that council wishes to support all forms of housing, including supportive housing, special needs housing, et cetera, which are already addressed in my report. The planning department also conferred with Janine Grunberg, senior partner at Brownlee LLP. Brownlee is one of the experts in Alberta on the Municipal Government Act. And Janine, when in my consultation with her, suggested that if council wishes to provide a service such as a shelter in the community, that they could utilize the CDC zoning, and it is appropriate. The CDC zoning is designed to provide municipal councils with the ability to approve developments of a contentious nature, and shelters are a great example of this. The use of the CDC district is not only appropriate and legal in this instance, but also aligns with our existing statutory plans, which is the check and balance that I was talking about. If council were to try to change, an example I could give you, and it's an extreme example, is if council were trying to use CDC zoning to approve, say, an intensive livestock operation next to a residential district. Our statutory plans don't speak to it. We don't have zoning regulations or requirements. That would be where use of the CDC would be an abuse of your authority under the legislation and statutory plans. But if we have statutory plans that already talk about the use that you're contemplating approving under the CDC, then there's an alignment, the check and balance that's supposed to be there. Slave Lake has a long history of appeals for developments such as supportive housings, group homes, and shelters. Appeals have been launched for approximately, I would say, 90% of the applications of this nature in all quadrants of town, which means these uses and the public objection to them are not isolated to only one area of town. The appeal process for these types of developments often extends and frustrates the development process. Other land use bylaw regulations add to this issue. And an example of that is if an application for a development is refused by the Subdivision Development Appeal Board, a similar application for the same parcel cannot come forward for a period of 6 months. And you can see how that could frustrate the process. It would mean that if council wanted to put a shelter on a particular piece of property and it was refused, they would have to start all over again with another location and start the application process again. And finally, we already alluded to this, annually revisiting the issue of a shelter in the community builds frustration, anger, and reduces confidence in the planning process and in the town as a whole. It seems people are, when they're just starting to settle down with the issue, we're reopening it again every year. Shelters are a service council wants to provide to the community, and the CDC gives council the ability to do that. Finally, the planning department did contact Janine Grunberg to determine if she was aware of any communities that use the CDC for shelters. And she indicated that the city of Red Deer and Strathcona County do. The planning department also conducted a Google search. We just typed in the phrase council direct control for shelters, supportive housing in Alberta. And we find that Lethbridge, Wetaskiwin, and Medicine Hat are also other communities that are using CDC zoning for their shelters. So with that in mind, I would like to recommend that bylaw number 19/2023 receive second and third reading. Any other questions? Thank you, Laurie.
Counselor Adams.
Couple things that I coming across here, I brought them up last time, but I would like to clarify again. Some of the definitions such as shelter temporary, I still believe should not be 6 months as a maximum with a 6-month moratorium after that. That is something I believe we should continue, and maybe even with a little more stability in there, allow temporary to be 1 year before there is a moratorium. As these systems can take longer to go through the process. And in this situation, it's also winters, 8 months, not 6, makes it a little more difficult.
I would state that in accordance with the land use bylaw, anything that's in place for a year is not considered temporary at all. It's usually 6 months is that time frame. However, it may be appropriate if council so chooses to change that to 8 months of operation and 5 months of
4 months.
no development, or 4 months, or 7 and 5, or whatever combination you feel is appropriate.
I feel like there's more.
Oh, there's more.
Okay.
You want me to keep going? I'm
You-
just
yeah.
giving some time for the rest of that discussion. Shelter permanent, that's another use we're using as a definition. Yet we have no zoning. We've removed anything that would have, or not removed, I guess, by removing shelter. We're now going into shelter permanent by putting that. We're not putting it under institutional zoning, and we don't have it under the C2 like we did before with shelter. Wondering why, what's the thought process behind that, and why are you only wanting to limit it to CDC?
I'm thinking, well, shelter permanent's going to be long-term. It's going to be, at least a year or 5 or whatever the case may be. And the idea is that we're not revisiting the application, and they're contentious and they're difficult to place. And putting it into CDC gives council the ability to do the public consultation and make that final decision without having to go into the institutional or commercial zoning and going through the appeal process and being frustrated by that whole appeal and start over again. We're not suggesting that for temporary shelters. We're only suggesting it for permanent. And that's because the long-term impacts to the community can be 1, 5, 15, or 20 years, and council should have the ability to make that decision and decide where those are going. That was the thinking behind that.
My understanding is CDC does not require use.
Yeah, there are no listed permitted or discretionary uses. If you look at the CDC district, it just has a general purpose and a couple of rules. So that's why the definition for shelter permanent says it can only be in the CDC district,
Why
because
do
there
we
aren't
need
listed
the-
uses.
Why would we need the,
Because if you don't put that, then shelter permanent can go anywhere or can't go anywhere because it's not listed. So if you don't indicate on shelter permanent that it can go in the CDC district and we remove that, then we've defined it, but we haven't listed it anywhere. Does that make sense?
I think permanent is also there to balance the temporary. So
It
that
is.
there is a definition, a difference between the two.
There is a
Both are
difference between the
identified,
two. Yes.
Is what I was assuming.
but if CDC doesn't require uses, then why would we
No,
define a
that's
use? Or am I
CDC
getting
does not
mixed up?
have a list of uses permitted or discretionary. So
We
anything
still
that,
need a use. Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
okay,
Thank you thank you.
no problem.
We kind of took ourselves around and.
We got in a circle. I got there. Why did you want to remove shelter temporary from C2?
Oh, shelter, the old shelter definition never used to be in the C2. It came in for a 1-year operation when it was operating in 2021 in the all type rentals building on 6th Ave.
As a
Was-
C1.
Well, it was C2 at the time. And that's why that came
When
into
it was
place.
C1.
Pardon?
When the shelter went in, it just got moved to C1. I thought that C2 definition was previous. No.
I believe it came in then, but I'm not exactly sure, but I don't believe we should be putting them in the commercial district. I think the intent is to either put them in CDC or institutional. And the institutional district is providing services for public or public quasi type music or quasi public uses. And it doesn't really fit in the commercial, in my opinion, shelter temporary. So that was why I pulled it out of there. It was a one-time change to allow the shelter to operate 1 year at a certain location, and it didn't really meet the intent.
I guess I'll just keep going.
Yeah, no,
I don't really
thanks.
have more. That's about all I have for questions right now, I suppose.
I was going to touch on the temporary. I do agree with Counselor Adams regarding the an extension to that. I'm not quite at the 1 year mark as per his opinion, because I do believe that we need a clear definition between temporary and permanent so that our land use bylaw, in my opinion, reads properly. I do believe in 8 and 4, so an 8 months and then a 4 months moratorium is a little more appropriate, given that we are effectively in the North Pole. And that we have snow in both October and May. So if we're looking for a temporary shelter, which I assume would be in our harshest months, it's an assumption I'm making that would cover that period. Yeah. But I would open that up to the other counselors for any discussion on that. Counselor Hughes.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest the same, actually. I like the idea of the 8 and 4, just for a little bit of extra time there. I do have a question for you, Lori. On the appeal process, what would happen if one of these locations was brought to MPC and then it was appealed and it goes to SDAB? Can you just remind me about those people that sit on SDAB? Are they regional people? Where
Yeah,
are
we
they
have
from?
an intermunicipal subdivision development appeal board. So we have we share our SDAB with the town of High Prairie, Big Lakes County, and the town of Swan Hills.
Okay,
And MD of Lesser Slave Lake and Slave Lake. The reason is because it's difficult to get people to sit on the board, trained people especially.
okay.
So we have an intermunicipal SDAB. When the appeal comes from the town of Slave Lake, then there would be one member that would sit typically from Slave Lake, and the remaining members would be made up from other members of the ISDAB. And they could come from High Prairie or Big Lakes County or Swan Hills. And sit on the board for that decision or for that hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Adams.
If I could make a comment to that as well. One of the challenges I find with SDAB on contentious issues such as this is your conflict of interest or it's not just about pecuniary interest like it is with council, where we're obligated to make decisions on everything unless we have a way that has direct financial repercussions for us. Even if you have bias or perceived bias, that is reason to excuse yourself. There's a whole different set of rules around it. So it's a lot harder for very contentious issues to be decided by a local member on SDAB.
Counselor Gremlin.
Make a motion, move that bylaw number 19-2023 to amend sections 3 and 110 and the land use district map of the land use bylaw number 22-2007 by redistricting as follows. Lot 12, block 1, plan 212-0278 from business institutional district to institutional district to council direct control. Ugh. Part of lot 4, block 3, plan 912-3753 from institutional district to council direct control. Lot 7 and 8, block 8, plan 1915 HW from C1 downtown commercial mixed use to council direct control. Part of lot 1, plan 992-3252 from institutional to council direct control received second reading.
As amended to reflect 8 and 4.
Yeah, what she said as amended.
Yes. Okay, there is a motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Muallim.
I just had a question. I think at one time we were also talking about, there was a 5th option that was on Highway 88 and Highway 6th Avenue Southwest, where the Phoenix Heights.
It already made.
Oh, it's already, okay.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? Okay, I will call to question those in favor. And that is carried. Counselor Ferguson?
The long reading here.
That's what I was wondering.
Move that bylaw number 19/2023 to amend section 388(3) and 110(3) and the land use district map, the land use bylaw number 22/2007 by redistricting as follows: lot 12, block 1, plan 2120278 from business industrial district and institutional district to council direct control district. Part of lot 4, block 3, plan 91232 or 3753 from institutional district to council direct control district. Lots 7 and 8, block 8, plan 1915 HW from C1 downtown commercial mixed use district to council direct control district, and part of lot 1, plan 992 3252 from institutional district to council direct control district receives third reading as amended.
Oh, you remembered the as amended. Okay. Motion's on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Call to question those in favor. And that is carried. Okay, moving forward. Development concept for Sunset Place. Lori.
Okay, your worship and members of council, the purpose of this report is to provide council with a development concept for Sunset Place. The landowner and applicant in this regard is the town of Slave Lake, and it's lot 78, plan 9320620. Sorry about that. The subject site is within the residential and general urban designation of the MDP. In accordance with section 672(4) of the MGA, when a municipal reserve is being disposed, money can be provided for in place of MR, and the interest earned on that money must be accounted for separately and must be used only for the purpose referred to in subsection 2. And that will come into play as we get into the report. So a little history. Originally, the site was dedicated as MR, lot 78 MR. In accordance with the report to council dated July 20, 2005, when the Southwest Area Structure Plan was adopted in 1988, the subject lands were designated for parks and open space, public open space. The 2004 Parks and Open Space Master Plan designated this site for an outdoor event site, which also aligned with the Southwest Area Structure Plan. In 2005, council disposed of the MR designation and the lands were rezoned from urban expansion district to R1 standard detached residential district. An appraisal of the lands was completed and lands were listed for sale. It should be noted that the cash value of the MR was not paid back to the reserve account when the MR was disposed of. As such, there is an outstanding obligation to pay the municipal reserves when these lands are developed. Essentially, an MR contribution consists of 10% of the value of the land at market value, unless otherwise negotiated with the subdivision authority. It is also worthy of note that in 2005, the cost to extend 6th Avenue Southwest from where it was stubbed off at the first entrance into Westside Village to Caribou Trail was about 1.2 million. This cost was a major factor in the financial viability of potential residential subdivision on the subject lands and or phase 2 of the Sarge Park Estates. So in November of 2007, a report was presented to council where an administration reported back with respect to an expression of interest ad that was placed in the Lakeside Leaner and the Journal of Commerce. No expressions of interest had been received. And so the matter was revisited again. And this was sort of what happened again in 2008, 2009, and 2010. In addition, in 2010, we did have a local developer who was looking at potentially developing the town's parcel, lot 78. And they were asking about some outstanding obligation on the Sawridge lands. At the end of that discussion, they decided to proceed with discussions with Sawridge as the town's parcel was much more difficult to develop. So nothing ever transpired with respect to that. That sort of ended there. In February 2011, council directed us to bring back another report for potential options for development of the subject lands. And actually that report was going to be presented to council the week of the May 2011 fire. So during that fire, obviously a portion of Slave Lake was destroyed, and in order to provide for an emergency housing site for residents, the subject lands were rezoned to council direct control, and emergency trailers were moved in for approximately 5 years to house displaced individuals in the community. In and around 2012, 14, the infrastructure for the Fournier Place subdivision was completed. During the development of that residential subdivision, the province paid for the cost to service that subdivision, as well as the extension of services down Main Street and the Sixth Avenue construction costs. As such, the major cost factors that had been inhibiting further development of the area were dealt with and paid for by the province at that time. This also means that there are no developer contributions that would be required of further developers if they were to develop Sawridge Park Estates or Lot 78 MR. On August 14th, 2018, council considered another report from administration and explored the options of developing the lands as an outdoor events fairground, a campground, or a residential subdivision. And at that time, the report was accepted as information and nothing more happened. The town removed all of the existing services within Lot 78 or Sunset, which were installed for the emergency trailers, with the exception of 4 hydrants. And essentially, there are 2 6-inch water main lines connected from 6th Avenue, which are connected to the hydrants and looped throughout the site. All other services, sewer, gas, and power, were removed. Geotechnical report, the Planning and Operations Department are aware that the drainage on the south end of the subject lands in the Sawridge Park Estates Phase 1 and 2 subdivision make its way around and partially through Sunset Place. Pardon me. Further, a detailed geotechnical report was prepared for the lands in Fournier. The geotechnical restricted the development of below ground foundations due to the high water table. The planning department suspects that both the drainage in and around Sunset and its proximity to Fournier may require the same development restriction for at least a portion of the site. And we're recommending that a geotechnical would be prepared at some point to determine those, if there are any issues and concerns. In addition, the planning department contacted Jeff Fetter Associated Engineering and requested more information with respect to a number of lots that could be potentially created, services that could be accommodated, and an opinion as to probable costs for design and construction of the subdivision. The necessary infrastructure includes water, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, and shallow utilities, which would be gas, power, phone, cable, and internet, as well as full urban standard roads, which would be curb, gutter, monolithic sidewalk, and asphalt. Associated has provided a cost estimate and a development concept, which is attached. The technical memorandum. The following is a brief outline of the information they provided with respect to the development concept and costs. So subdivision layout based on the lot dimensions of 36.5 meters in depth by an average lot width of 16 to 18 meters. The average lot size would be about 643 square meters. The proposed lots are larger than those in Fournier Place. The lots backing onto 6th Ave Southwest are smaller, sized at 593 square meters. The subdivision in the concept provided would consist of 61 single-family lots. Roadways are planned with an 18-meter right-of-way as per the town's development standards and procedures. MR dedications of a 0.62 hectare are required as per the MGA, and 1 park and open space area has been planned and is centrally located, much the same as Fournier Place. This would be in addition to the outstanding obligation to pay for the disposal of the MR discussed earlier in the report. The stormwater management facility size in accordance with the one constructed in Fournier Place is proposed. The size of the stormwater management facility would need to be confirmed once detailed engineering design is undertaken. With respect to servicing, the water distribution system would consist of a 200 millimeter diameter water main that loops along the roadway with hydrants spaced at approximately 120 meters as per the town's development standards and procedures. The existing services discussed above will need to be abandoned as they are of insufficient size. So those are the ones that currently exist. Again, water distribution servicing will need to be confirmed once detailed engineering design is undertaken. The subdivision is proposed to be serviced with a 200 millimeter diameter gravity sanitary sewer main. And the sanitary sewer services will need to be confirmed again once engineering design is undertaken. The subdivision is also proposed to be serviced with a 300 millimeter diameter storm sewer main, as well as a stormwater management facility, so wet pond, as we have in Fournier. An assessment of the downstream sanitary sewer will be required to confirm if the capacity to accommodate the stormwater flows for the proposed subdivision will fit into the size of pond that they're thinking. If the rate has to be reduced, it will result in a larger storm management facility. And it would be Alberta Environment that would be telling us in capacities whether or not we'd have to reduce the outflows. There are abandoned gas service lines within the subject area, and there is a gas main on Sixth Ave Southwest, so it's assumed the subdivision could be serviced from this gas main. However, discussions are required with ATCO Gas. There are overhead power and telecommunication lines in the south side of Sixth Ave. And again, it is assumed that power and telecommunications could be extended from Sixth Ave and would require discussions with ATCO. So next steps, the memorandum outlines steps required in the planning process, including preparation of an outline plan and various land use maps, tentative plan of subdivision, subdivision application, etc. Probable costs. This section presents conceptual Class D opinion of probable cost estimates for planning, engineering, and construction costs associated with the design and construction of the proposed subdivision. Due to the conceptual nature of the study and the understanding that there are unknown variables beyond the scope of this study, the estimates presented include a contingency allowance of 50% and an engineering allowance of 15%. The total estimated capital cost, which are summarized in a table within the memorandum. The great unknowns are the conditions of the 150 millimeter diameter water main and the condition of the gravel and how much of it could be reused on site. Hydraulic modeling would be required to confirm the ultimate pipe size requirements, and subdivision design would have to consider how best, obviously, to use the gravel on site. Given the uncertainty in many of the details as to how this site may be developed, we suggest to plan for a budget ranging from 11 million to 13 million for 61 single family residential lots. So there are some options. Council could consider a phased development approach of the development concept provided by Associated. So I wouldn't recommend building all 61 lots. It would be, maybe build 15 or 20 lots. Option 2, you could amend the development concept to include medium or high density lots as well as single family. Again, a phased approach could be utilized. And when I say high density, it may be for buffering against the industrial. That's usually where you'd see high density backing onto that part. And I'm also thinking that may be the portion of the site where the geotechnical may show that below ground foundations are a problem. So that would be a good place to have the high density, everything on ground and above. The third option is council could advertise an expression of interest to ascertain if there are any land developers interested in developing a residential subdivision. The information in this report could be provided as part of that process. Resource impacts include funding of the infrastructure, engineering, planning portions of the project, and also based on current staffing levels in the planning department, we would require additional resources and support in order to carry that out. Any questions?
Councillor Adams.
I guess, what is our normal practice, or what is the normal practice for buffering from an industrial to a residential area?
Well, typically, the normal practice is typically we don't have industrial right next to the residential, right? But in the event that you have something like that, you can do noise attenuation, berms and fences, or you can go with higher density that backs on to that industrial so that it buffers the single family from the industrial use. So there's a number of things you can do, but obviously noise attenuation berms and fences are very expensive and they weren't contemplated in this model either.
My other question on it was the current zoning, as I understand it, has R3 right along the industrial edge.
Yes.
But I couldn't make out just how far in that line
I think,
comes.
yeah, it's not precise and it's just meant to give you sort of a conceptual idea of how far you would go. But I'm thinking it's roughly 1/3 high density and 2/3 of the site, thereabouts would be single family, but that would be ironed out when you got down to the actual design phase and you could confirm how much of that would be high density and adjust the zoning at that time.
Thank you.
Councilor Ferguson.
So just to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, so there's roughly 61 lots. And the cost to get these lots ready would be about 11 to 13 million. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
So and I do the math, that works out to close to $200,000 per lot, which I don't know if the economics of that necessarily make sense. And so my thought, the only way that it may start to make sense is if the density is increased. That'd be kind of my 2 cents on it.
Increase the volume of residents.
Yeah.
It's very expensive. Councilor Adams.
I would rather see us putting this out as an expression of interest across. I would rather see, much like came to the same conclusion as Councillor Ferguson, was the higher density is an R3 rating, and I was even contemplating stepping down to an R2 and not necessarily going into R1. But that is something for a developer to decide, but I'd rather see it go to an expression of interest rather than the town taking on another development project. And I guess I'm a little gun shy after our current one.
I would tend to agree with that. Jeff.
So I think that the intention of the report tonight was more to, there's been a lot of discussion at council and the council table about housing and availability of housing and different types of housing. And as you know, we're working with, potential development as it relates to Fournier Place, but exploring, this parcel of land and looking for, is there any other kind of types of properties that maybe we're missing that we're not, providing availability. So although, for the purpose of this report, you've got a, conceptual design of 61 lots. By no means necessarily is that meant to be necessarily what's, what needs to happen, but really more of an exploration of the viability and the potential construction costs related to a development in that area, whether it's R3 or higher density, or whether it's a portion of maybe for ownership of trailer or mobile homes, or whatever the case may be, that fits kind of the needs of what the community has that aren't being serviced maybe through some of the other locations. So it was really just more to kind of to put that to council. Two, I'll just remind that there was, and Lori mentioned in a report, because there's still a high level, the level of this review is really high. There's no geo done. There's no real testing of what that is. And so, as she mentioned, you've got a 50% contingency built into this potential projection or plan, right? 50% is significant. So double the price potentially just to cover the unknowns. As we start to go down that road, or whoever goes down that road, those unknowns become known and that contingency requirement starts to become less. But for the sake of not underestimating, you've got a 50% contingency. I would say engineering at 10 to 15% is probably adequate and average, regardless of what that project looks like. But 50% is significantly high, but it's high because we don't know a lot of the answers.
I should add too that we know that construction costs have gone up, and in 2012, 13 and 14, when Fournier was being built, that subdivision, and it included the extension of 6th Ave. But it was at 2013 or 2012 construction costs was in the realm of 11 million, not including the park development that the town paid for.
So what I'm hearing then, Jeff, is that perhaps this is something that is better suited to keep in the strategic plan with regards to answers, perhaps, that if we do want to pursue additional housing developments, here's one option.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the one other thing I was going to mention is we have recently submitted a grant application that would potentially cover some of the costs relating to this development, whether it's infrastructure, planning, engineering, whatever the case may be. So we haven't received a response yet, but I would say that the amount that we've put in terms of that application is significant, as 7 figures, which would potentially help explore the viability of this development and whether or not it's a phased approach that the town manages, whether we take an interest in solving other housing issues with this opportunity, there's a number of different factors, I think, that council could explore and it, obviously, we're not looking for a decision tonight by any means, but just really more of a we peeked in the box a little bit and there's some options available.
Appreciate that. Counselor Hughes.
Will you hear back on this grant application? Do you have a timeline or?
I don't. I anticipate it should be sooner than later, but it was submitted or coordinated by our communications manager, and I don't know if he's got a deadline as to when the decision's being made.
Right, thanks.
I believe, Laura, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's a federal grant that he had supplied.
Yeah, I believe that's right.
Yeah.
Federal, yeah.
Counselor Moellem.
I'll move the council accept this report as information.
Counselor Adams.
Additional discussion. I do like this idea, but I like it better for a high density kind of development. We are short in Slave Lake of high density housing. Or even any density housing for that matter, I guess, but I would like us to explore that route, one, to get a more affordable housing in place for people and options, and also to just simply increase the number that are available within our existing town limits. I would almost like to see this as opposed to going. It doesn't make sense to send this out for an expression of interest at this time, or is it still way too early for something like this?
Oh, I
Never
mean,
done
you may
this.
want to wait to see what happens with the grant. And then we could, come back with an expression of interest.
And go down
or
that road in the future.
Explore, yeah.
Or part of the strategic plan, because if we're looking at
discuss it
multiple
then.
areas and receiving the grant, I think that might be effective
Yep.
as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Counselor Ferguson.
Just so we don't lose track of it, did Councillor Adams want to make a motion to that effect so that
Management task list. So kicks around. Okay, okay, so we'll stick with the report as information first. Any further discussion? Call to question those in favor. And that is carried. Counselor Adams.
I'd like to make a motion that administration brings this back. We should probably put a timeline on it, eh? When would be an appropriate time?
I
In
mean,
the new year
ideally,
at
we
some
would
point.
probably start looking or revisiting maybe our strategic plan.
January,
Early,
February?
early 2024, once we're past budget and we're starting to look forward to future budgets and financial planning and strategic plans tie into those often.
February.
So I would say-
2024.
Yeah, February 2024 would be good.
That's fine. That's a good goal.
All right, there we go.
Any further discussion? Call to question those in favor. And that is carried. Thank you, Lori. We have a report by Ashley.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The purpose of this report is to have council approve bylaw number 20-2023 municipal by-election and to call the municipal by-election required under the Municipal Government Act to fill the vacancy on council. Background: on September 5th, 2023, Julie Brandel resigned from her position as councillor for the town of Slave Lake effective immediately. In accordance with the Municipal Government Act, MGA, Section 162, a by-election is required to fill the vacancy as there are more than 18 months before the next scheduled general election in 2025. So the MGA states vacancy in position of councillor 162A, council must hold a by-election to fill a vacancy on council unless the vacancy occurs after January 1st in the year of the general election. Council consists of 6 or more councillors and the vacancy occurs in 18 months before a general election. And there is only 1 vacancy, or in the 12 months before a general election and the number of councillors remaining is at least 1 more than the majority of the number of councillors comprising the council under section 143. So neither of those apply. And discussion general, in accordance with the MGA and timelines, council will need to call the by-election before January 3rd, 2024. After council has made a resolution calling the by-election, nomination period will begin morning following the resolution being passed until 4 weeks before the designated date of election. Administration is recommending that the by-election be held November 28th, 2023. This would open nomination period on October 4th, 2023 at 8 a.m. and it would run until October 31st, 2023 until 12 p.m. Advanced polls will be held Saturday, November 18th and Thursday, November 23rd at the Town of Slave Lake Council Chambers from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Election Day, November 28th, would have polls opening at 9 a.m. and closing at 8 p.m. Bylaw. Administration has drafted bylaw number 2023 number 2023 municipal by-election attached. This bylaw will outline the necessary requirements under the two forms of legislation that governs the election process of municipal elections. The Municipal Government Act, Local Authorities Election Act. This bylaw will set nomination period, advance polls, and election date. For budget, by-election was not planned or budgeted for in the 2023 budget. Administration estimates the cost to hold a by-election is $13,000. This projection is based on the 2021 municipal general election and 2023 by-election expenses and costs. Although the by-election has fewer candidates, the regulations and required documents do not decrease based on the number of candidates. The associated cost of a by-election would need to be funded from the future expenditures reserve, and a motion from council would be required to do so. Administration is requesting a motion for up to $15,000 to account for any contingencies that may come and arise from material costs. So you have two options before you. Pass the required resolution calling the by-election, give all required readings to bylaw number 20-2023, municipal by-election bylaw, pass resolution to fund the municipal by-election out of future expenditure reserve for up to $15,000. Or you can table this matter for review and bring back later to a later date before required, January 3rd, 2024, it should read. Resource impacts. Holding a municipal by-election will have associated costs that are not currently budgeted for and will need to be funded. Key positions involved in planning and execution of the by-election will be required to shift focus away from their current roles within the organization due to the short time frame. There will also be impacts in staff time and some minor disruptions to service as administration is planning to run the election using internal staff for polling stations rather than outsourcing. Policy implications. This will rescind bylaw number 04-2023 municipal by-election bylaw. Communication strategy. Local newspapers will be used to advertise in accordance with the MGA and LAEA. The Town of Slave Lake will communicate timelines regarding nomination period, advance polls and election date, but will refrain from advertising nominated candidates. Please note that when I mean advertising, meaning posting their campaign, we'll still post who is able to run, but we will not promote any campaigns on social media platforms or websites. My recommendation to council is pass the required resolution calling the by-election, give all required readings to bylaw number 20-2023 municipal by-election bylaw. Pass the resolution out of the future expenditure reserve for up to $15,000.
Councilor Ferguson.
It's pretty straightforward to me. I did have one quick question. Are you planning on doing any institutional voting or?
Yes, we will. So once this is passed, I will reach out to all the institutions and we will go to Sweetgrass, Vanderwells in the hospital. And I'll make sure that don't leave anybody else out. If I haven't noted that, but that's the general ones we do go to. So we will coordinate that and we will also advertise it once it's confirmed.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Councilor Adams.
Just a quick question. Do we normally hold 2 advanced polls? Is that a requirement or do we do that just to gain more opportunity for people to vote?
It is up to us. We should have one advanced polling day, but this gives the option of during work hours and outside of work hours. So we wanted to do the combination of both.
And this was what we did for the most recent by-election.
Councilor Graham.
Move to call municipal by-election to take place on November 28th, 2023.
Motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Call to question those in favor. And that is carried. Councilor Hughes.
Move to give bylaw number 20-2023 municipal by-election bylaw first reading.
Any further discussion? Call to question those in favor. And that is carried. Councilor Adams.
Move to give bylaw 20-2023 municipal by-election bylaw second reading.
Any further discussion? Call to question those in favor. And that is carried. Councilor Moallem.
Move to give bylaw 20-2023 municipal by-election bylaw unanimous consent to receive third reading.
Any further discussion? Call to question those in favor, and that is carried. Counselor Ferguson.
Move to give bylaw 2023 municipal by-election bylaw third reading.
Any further discussion? Call to question those in favor, that is carried. Counselor Adams.
Move to fund up to $15,000 for municipal by-election out of the future expenditures reserve.
Any further discussion? Call to question those in favor, and that is carried. Thank you, Ashley. Question period. Anything from council? I'm looking at you, Steve. Counselor Ferguson.
I just have one comment for Jeff. I notice when you are at the lights by ATV and you're heading west on Third Street or Third Ave. So I don't know if you can picture that. It's actually across the street from Creative Goods. There's quite often parking that blocks off the right-hand turning lane. I'm wondering if administration would be able to look into just a no parking from sign to sign. It's quite a common occurrence that people park there and block off the turning to go north on Main Street.
Yeah, I mean, we would typically, yeah, we definitely could. You could give us a motion. We could add it to the task list and I could have likely operations or I guess fire potentially bring something back that would, I'm not sure if that would require an amendment to our traffic bylaw or not. I'd have to go back and take a look if it's that specific in regards to no parking areas, but.
Counselor Adams for commentary.
I understand that's already no parking area.
I believe this was.
So it's just-
I don't see it.
Just
I mean, technically it's a no parking zone because it's with an X amount of space of the thing. I don't see any signs though.
No, I think that's what he's meaning is that there's no signs, but it's not a change to the traffic bylaw because it's.
I see people parking right up almost to the stop line on a quite frequent basis.
Outside the parking lines?
Yeah.
Because the parking line ends.
But I think you back up like that last parking line and then you use the crosswalk as the front parking line.
Well, if there,
I don't think-
if it's existing, then I by all means just can bring it to the attention of our bylaw.
Just putting it on your radar anyways.
You can
for
put it
sure.
on management task, that's if you'd like.
Okay, I will make a motion to administration to explore no parking signs at the intersection of Main Street and Third Avenue East.
Call to question or any further discussion? Call to question those in favor, and that is carried. Anything further for question period? As I see nothing, we'll move into state of the lake. Counselor Moellem.
Firstly, I would like to welcome our first of hopefully a number of international nurses to Slave Lake. Her name is, and I'm going to screw this up, Mutenrayo Adiyeo, and she is from Nigeria. She arrived in Slave Lake this past weekend and will be working at the Slave Lake Hospital. Please give her a warm smile and welcome if you do see her. Mutenrado hopes to be able to bring her family to our community in the near future.
I will, okay, I guess I will talk about last week. So last week we were at the Alberta Municipalities Conference. It was a fantastic opportunity, not only for sessions and to hear from our provincially elected officials, but we had 10 minister meetings by the end of the week, which was actually quite extensive, and there were a lot of productive discussions there. The opportunity to meet with ministers doesn't come by that frequently, but thanks to our MLA, we've actually had that happen quite regularly. He attended all our meetings with us, and we actually had the Minister of Health, Minister LaGrange, here today as well. So it kind of feels like Alberta Municipalities has extended into this week. It was a great week of advocacy and partnership, and I would just like to thank our administration for coming with us. Our executive assistant Ashley and our CAO Jeff did a fantastic job of keeping us organized and with regards to the briefing notes and kind of rounding us all together. So I'm really looking forward to some interesting things coming out of those meetings and furthering a lot of those discussions. I think we have a great future with our MLA really putting the best foot forward for Slave Lake, and our council joined him in that. And so it was a fantastic week. And Councillor Hughes.
Motion to go into closed session.
Or any further discussion? Call to question those in favor. And that is carried.
Oh, I'm sorry.